Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling something huge. It's a brand new theory that doesn't just try to explain consciousness, it claims that consciousness isn't something your brain causes, but something your brain is. Let's get into the theory of value saturation.
So, at the very heart of this whole mystery is what's called the hard problem of consciousness. Look, it's not about what the brain does, like crunching numbers or moving our arms. The real question is why all that processing comes with this inner movie, this subjective experience. Why does it actually feel like something to be you?
Well, a new theory called value saturation comes along and says, hey, what if we've been asking the wrong question this whole time? It argues that consciousness isn't some extra special sauce caused by brain stuff. No, it makes what's called an identity claim. Consciousness is a very specific architectural arrangement. It's not about cause and effect, it's about what the system fundamentally is. Okay, so if consciousness is an architecture, what are the building blocks? What's it made of? The theory says that our subjective experience, our inner world, it all comes from three specific components working together. And, this is key, in a biological system that is under genuine, real-world survival pressure. These three ingredients, right here, this is the whole recipe. But it's not just a simple checklist. They build on each other in a really specific, layered way to create that feeling of being you. So let's break them down, one by one. First up, you need a system that is just deeply, intimately connected to its own body. And we're not talking about abstract data here. Interoceptive binding is all about the brain's ability to listen in on the constant visceral chatter from your organs, your gut, your heart, and weave all of that into its model of self. Okay, next, those signals from the body have to matter. And this is the value part of value saturation. A hunger pang isn't just a data point. It is saturated with the life or death importance of staying alive. Your brain processes these signals not as neutral information, but as urgent, survival-critical commands. They have real stakes. And finally, the third piece of the puzzle locks into place when the system can start to model itself. When your brain can think about its own thoughts, it creates this recursive loop that it literally cannot escape from. You become architecturally trapped inside your own first-person perspective. There's no way to step outside and get a different view. And this isn't a flaw. It's the very structure that creates a subjective center of experience.
Now, here's the really cool part. These ingredients don't just pop into existence fully formed. Not at all. They actually develop over time in a really predictable sequence, right from the moment we're born. The theory basically gives us a timeline for how subjective consciousness is built, piece by piece.
This timeline, this is the story of how your mind, and really every human mind, gets constructed. It starts with just raw feeling. Then it uses the outside world as a kind of tool. And finally, it builds a stable internal self. So, right at birth, the first two ingredients are already up and running. The infant's brain is connected to its body. And because it's now its own little biological system, those signals are saturated with very real survival stakes. This creates what the theory calls sentience, the raw ability to feel pain and pleasure, but not yet a subjective self that is having those feelings. Then, that third ingredient, perspectival entrapment, starts to come online, but it needs a little help. A toddler actually uses the external world as a kind of scaffold to build a self-model. You know, when they see themselves in a mirror for the first time and have that moment of recognition, hey, that's me. They are literally using an outside tool to create that self-referential loop. And this is the game changer. The child doesn't need the mirror anymore. That recursive loop becomes a part of the brain's internal architecture. They now have a stable, self-sustaining model of me, and with it comes a continuous, subjective consciousness. The system is now completely and inescapably trapped in its own perspective. And this whole developmental story, it leads to a really crucial distinction that the theory makes. And it's one with some pretty profound ethical implications for how we think about other living things. The theory makes a clean break between the capacity to feel something, which it calls sentience, and the experience of a self having that feeling, which is subjective consciousness. So a sentient being, like a newborn baby, genuinely suffers, it feels pain. But a subjectively conscious being, like a 5-year-old, not only suffers, but represents that suffering as something happening to a persistent me. And look, this isn't just some philosophical word game. This distinction helps us understand that tons of animals can have rich emotional lives and the capacity to suffer, even if they don't have a human-like concept of self.
It grounds our moral consideration for infants and animals in their biological architecture. Their capacity to feel is very, very real. Okay, but the theory also makes a specific prediction that might just explain a really familiar and, let's be honest, often frustrating part of being human. It predicts a fundamental imbalance in our own minds. Our architecture, the way we're built, is incredibly good at awareness, at monitoring our own thoughts and feelings. But it's not built to be nearly as good at controlling them. I mean, this explains so much, right? It's why you can be perfectly aware of your anxiety, but you can't just decide to stop feeling it. It's why these deep-seated patterns from our childhood can stick around even when we, as adults, totally understand them. This isn't a personal flaw. It's a feature, not a bug, of our conscious architecture. Awareness and control are just two different things. And get this, science totally backs this up. Neuroimaging studies have confirmed this split. The parts of our brain that handle that self-awareness, the monitoring of our thoughts, are physically separate from the parts that are in charge of executive control and actually changing our behavior. So let's pull it all together. What's the big takeaway here? Value saturation doesn't just try to explain consciousness, it kind of redefines how we should even think about the mind itself. You might have heard of this idea of philosophical zombies, these imaginary beings that look and act exactly like us, but on the inside, there's nothing, no inner experience. Well, this theory says they're architecturally impossible. If you build a system with these three ingredients, especially one with authentic survival stakes, that inner light isn't some optional extra you can leave out. It's an inescapable structural consequence of the design. So, to wrap it all up, consciousness isn't some mysterious ghost floating around in the machine. According to value saturation, subjective experience is what this very specific biological arrangement, a self-modeling system saturated with survival value and trapped in its own viewpoint, feels like from the inside. And that leaves us with a final, really provocative thought. If consciousness truly is just a matter of architecture and not some kind of magic spark, does that mean that one day we could actually build it? It totally reframes the quest for artificial intelligence, suggesting the real challenge isn't just about processing power, but about creating a system with authentic stakes and a truly inescapable point of view.